Hello again. This is the Rocker Dog Podcast, the show that talks to people in and around the music world about their dogs. I'm your host, Tim Dill. Sleeping on the job is my dog, Charlie. And for the second time this week, we are welcoming a helpful ally to the show. This time around, we're talking with Amy Sciarretto of Adam Splitter PR, who's provided press campaigns for such acts as Falling in Reverse, Sleep Token, and Alice Cooper, and has provided guests for this very show. And these are her so cute you want to punch the wall rocker dogs.
We'll speak about Higgins, who was my bulldog that I had for 13 years. Titus, who recently passed away. He was a rescue, and I had him for about 8 years. We've got Wilbur, who is my current dog here now. And we can speak about Penelope, who was my foster, who I'm still in her life. Her and Wilbur were not getting along in the house. More like she was being very, very claiming of his territories. So she's back with her foster mom. I'm still visiting her. I'm actually, covering her cancer treatment, and I'm still going to see her, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. All right. Well, I think there's a lot to cover.
A lot, yes.
Let's go back to the beginning with Higgins.
Yeah.
I assume that's your soul dog.
That was my heart and soul dog, yes. He was a pure English Bulldog, and I had him from the time he was 8 weeks old until he passed away. Actually, March of 2022, he passed away. So we're coming up on 3 years. And he was by my side every single day. Love of my life, my heart dog, yes. And a rocker fact about him is that his name, which is on his AKC papers, his name was Higgins because I wanted him to have a proper English name because he's an English Bulldog. People used to say Higgins like Magnum PI, and I'd be like, no, Higgins like Henry Higgins from My Fair Lady / Pygmalion. Don't any of you people read? But that's, Henry Higgins was a gentleman. So I wanted to give him a gentlemanly name, but I also had to give him a metal name because, that's, important to me. And I wanted him to be a metal dog too. So his full name was Higgins Hansen Anselmo Sciarretto. And that is Philip Anselmo from Pantera. His name is Philip Hansen Anselmo. So I gave him, like Phil was his dad. And when I interviewed Phil once, his manager told me, you got to tell him about Higgins' name. And I told him the story. And in typical Phil fashion, he just said, that's fucking awesome. So I was like, yes, I named my dog after you, at least his two middle names.
So was Higgins like this epiphany to a life with dogs?
Well, yeah, I had dogs growing up. We had Scottish Terriers growing up when I was a kid, and we had an English Bulldog growing up as well. So we always had dogs in the house, and I just always wanted bulldogs. I was like, they're so cute. They make you want to punch a wall. They're just like, every time I see one, they're little chunky asses. I just want to bite it. They're just such a unique breed. And I had gotten Higgins, and I admit this because I don't have the same feeling now as I do, but I did get Higgins from a breeder. I would never do that again. I'm not anti-breeder. I have friends who are breeders. I just prefer to rescue because I also spent 10 years volunteering at an animal shelter, walking dogs, mostly pit bulls. And I did that for 10 years. And everything that I've learned and seen in the shelter system, that's what made me rescue all of my other animals after. However, Higgins was the gateway to that because he had such a great life, when I got him, and he had people like basically trying to bid on him because bulldogs are, they're expensive. Their price is expensive. Taking care of them is expensive because they have unique needs, medical needs. Because Higgins had such a great life, it inspired me to work at the shelter. So I feel like I paid that back tenfold. But yes, Higgins was, when I started my business, I was working from home and he was by my side every single day. I think I calculated it was like several 100,000 hours that I spent with him. He was by my side. So when he passed away, he died March 2022, and he was, I think, almost 13. That's a long time for a bulldog. Bulldogs usually get between 8 and 10 years because of their breathing issues. But a lot of people say it was a testament to the care that he had because I had insurance on him. He had a dermatologist. I brushed his teeth every day. I really took taking care of him seriously. And anybody who says that being a dog mom isn't being a mom, I'm just like, because you know what? I met all of his needs, physical, medical, all of it. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. You're keeping someone alive.
Yeah.
That's the same thing as parenting. But, he passed away from a condition called bloat. It's a fatal condition. I saw it in shelter dogs. You have like 24 hours. You have to correct it with surgery or it's fatal because their stomach basically,
That's
it's
the
like,
stomach twist,
yeah,
right?
like the
Yeah.
stomach flips and it's like, like balloon animals, twists like that, and then they can't get any food in it. And I rushed him to the emergency room. I knew something wasn't right because I know my dog. And I rushed him to the emergency room and they told me they were like, we can either humanely euthanize him because a 13-year-old bulldog having surgery is tough. I mean, it's because they have to intubate them because they're unique breathing. They can choke, they can aspirate. It's very dangerous to put a bulldog under after a certain age. And
Yeah.
I would only do it for life or death matters. And they said, we can humanely euthanize him or we can try the surgery. And I said, well, if we euthanize him, there's only one outcome. If we try the surgery, there's two. He makes it or he doesn't. Do the surgery. This is the case. And he did not make it to the surgery. And my vet even said if he didn't make it to the surgery, he wasn't going to make it through the surgery. So he let me know it's time to go, mom. And it was the absolute hardest day of my life. I don't know how I got through that because it was hard.
I can
Um,
imagine.
I didn't know who I was if I wasn't his mom.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that, some of the stuff I got off your Instagram, I felt that Higgins was, you talked about raising him as a mom and taking care of all his needs, but on the flip side, he seemed to have taken care of a lot of your needs as
Oh,
well.
absolutely. I got him, and I think I interrupted myself. I got him after a breakup. My friend Karen was like, "You gotta get a dog. You gotta do something." Because I had a significant breakup where I thought my life was going to change and I was going to move, and I thought this was going to be the person I was with forever. And it wasn't. And I was really, really low. It really tore me up. It changed me like on a cellular level. And when I got Higgins, it was like now it was not about me. It was about me and him. It was about getting him up, taking care of him, training him, all that stuff. And I always liken it to that scene in Silence of the Lambs when the girl is in that pit in,
And
I sorry it's so morbid, but it's effective. She's in that pit in his house and she's down in that hole and there's no way out. She can't climb up, and I'm not talking about the scene where she gets his dog. Like you can't climb out of that. She can't get up. It's smooth. There's no way to get out of that pit. And that was me. Like I was in that emotional hole and Higgins was at the top of that hole and he threw the rope down. And I just imagined him putting it in his mouth and throwing it down to me and pulling me up with his teeth. And he did. He saved me. He pulled me out of that hole. He gave me something to focus on. He gave me something to love. He taught me that I could love something else and someone else. And it was a great love story. He was the great love of my life. He taught me so much about love and about how to get through things and how to have patience and how to have resilience.
that's amazing. It's
Yeah.
funny because one of the things you said, and it had an emoji, it says, because of him, my heart was healed,
Yeah.
but the heart was black.
Yeah. Always. Well, that's on brand
Okay.
because I don't wear anything but black.
And I'm curious, it's funny because you have a similar kind of path as me because my dog is a breed, I've got a golden doodle, but that's a
Mhm.
classic, breeding dog, which of
Of
course,
course, I say
there's
petri dish
just,
dog, as I say.
although there's just something in the news about a breeder getting busted, and now there's about 40 golden doodles at a shelter. But that inspired me to, I think it was just a natural evolution of like getting more into dogs and then realizing what the shelter system's all about, and then volunteering at the shelter system, then seeing it all firsthand.
Yeah.
But was that a similar path? Like how long was it from getting Higgins to then volunteering and
Oh,
learning more
probably like
about?
a year and a half because I just had so much love for Higgins and I was in this phase where I was working from home and I was working too much. And my friend Rick was like, "You love dogs. Why don't you go like walk dogs at a shelter? You'll get exercise, you'll get out of your own head." And then I started doing that. I said, "Higgins has such a beautiful life and he wants for nothing." So I was like, and there's dogs out there that aren't getting that. So maybe I could just show them some of that and just be part of the story of these dogs, helping them. The shelter was a temporary pit stop, and I viewed my role as getting them from A to B. I never could look at them as a dog I could adopt. It had to be, I'm just helping you get to your next destination in your forever family. And I
Yeah.
worked with dogs that were part of fighting rings. I worked with a dog that was rescued. We actually got four dogs that were supposed to be, that were part of the the dog meat trade. And I worked with one dog. Her name was Tisha. I'll never forget her. She was a big mastiff. She didn't know how to be a dog. Her paws were spread out like this from standing on a wire cage because she was never socialized because she
Yeah.
was not supposed to make it. And she was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The first time I gave her a bath, she had no idea what to do. She used to stare shit over her kennel. I would get all over me, but she just had this quiet strength and soul to her. And I remember the day she got adopted, and it was just so rewarding to watch that happen because I was like,
Yeah.
that dog was never even supposed to be in this country or still be alive. And
Yeah.
it was just rewarding to be a part of her life. She taught me more than I could ever have taught her, or she did more for me than I could have ever done for her.
Yeah. I hear resilience quite often as a recurring theme. And also, there was something you said, oh, the beauty of forgiveness,
Yeah. hmm That came.
which is astounding because I see that as well. Like an
Yeah.
abused dog that's willing to kind of forget its past and just focus on the future.
And accept humans. I remember this dog that I loved at the shelter, Deefer, and whatever happened to him, I don't want to know, but that it was not good, but he was adopted out and then he came back to the shelter in this horrific condition. I'm watching people sob seeing him like this, and he's still licking our faces. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever was done to him didn't harden him. And I can actually segue that into Titus, my other bulldog, who he was a rescue. I met him at the shelter. He was an effing mess. Okay. He was found in Camden, which is not an area you want to be lost in. He had half of his fur was worn off. He was also found wandering around in like late June. That's no good for a bulldog given their specific breathing issues. His paws were like 3 times the size they should have been because in Camden he's stepping on glass, hot cement. There's
Yeah.
no parks, or grass that he could step on. And he was in terrible condition. And the ACO, the animal control officer, said, this dog's owners come back. Do not release him to the owners until I do a home check because he was in that bad a condition. Because owners in New Jersey have 10 days to pick up their animal. If you don't, it becomes property of the shelter and is then allowed to be adopted out pending that it is adoptable. So I
Yeah.
met him at the shelter. He was a mess, and somebody's like, "There's a bulldog in the back." So I was like, "Oh, gotta go," because everybody knows I'm a bulldog lover. And I took him out, and he was a mess. He was just so cute and a tiny little mess. And I took him home to foster him for a night. And Higgins was dog friendly, and Higgins was fine with other dogs unless they were in his house. He was always take your ball and go home. You can't sleep over. And I tried to adopt 4 bulldogs with Higgins, and he vetoed all of them. He didn't care and it's always their decision, not mine. They don't care what I want. They just want me to pay for it. But Higgins did not want another dog in this space. But I brought him home to my dad's house. I stay at my dad's on the weekends because the house had enough space. I was like had my own wing to the house, and Higgins and I were downstairs, and I brought him home and at Titus home just for an overnight stay, just to give him some decompression. So he had a little kennel cough and at the shelter, we didn't want it to get worse. I had to keep him away from Higgins so Higgins didn't get it. But Higgins immediately vetoed him, did not want him to be there, but I kept them separated. I thought it was just going to be for the night. And then my dad was like, yeah, I don't want this dog going back to the shelter. Keep him here. Louis, my dad's golden retriever, who was a rescue. He's like, him and Louis will be fine. We'll work to get him and Higgins to learn to socialize. And we tried that. It didn't work. So Titus stayed at my dad's. And last December, we found out that he had a brain tumor and he was too old. You can't really operate on it. So we managed the symptoms, which was the seizures. But he was still his happy self. You wouldn't even have known he was sick. And then he took a turn for the worse, like overnight. He was having these little cluster seizures that just wouldn't stop, just like
Mm.
little bobbleheads. And the next day he couldn't, this is in January of this year, he couldn't like stand on his own to go to the bathroom. He couldn't swallow. And we always said treats are his favorite thing in the world. And if he can't get to his treats and he can't swallow them, he let us know that it was his time and his quality of life was not going to be what he deserved. And we think he was probably 11 or 12 because he was a rescue. And he let us know, and we had to put him to sleep. And that's when I said with him, he never let whatever happened to him harden his heart. And that was the lesson I took from him was, yeah, life sucks and life is not fair. But he taught me to just try not to let life harden your heart. Because if
Yeah.
he could get past whatever he got past, then there's the lesson in that. That's what he taught me. And he was just a happy boy. It was tragic when losing him because he was such a good boy. He was such a sweet boy. And, I'm glad we were able to give him a really good second act.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. It's amazing that you get so much profound life lessons from these dogs.
They're there. You just have to see them. I tell people that all the time, and a lot of the shelter dogs, when people come to the shelter, they go, I could never do this. I want to take them all home. And I go, listen, I look at it this way. This is not ideal, but they are safe, they're fed, they're warmed, they're cared for, they're cleaned, and they're with each other. They're all roommates. They're not out on the street, or they're not in a situation where somebody doesn't want them,
Yeah.
and then that's when bad things can happen. And then Wilbur, who is that okay if I'm just going into like my
Yeah.
next?
Yep.
Wilbur is who lives with me now. He's my current bulldog, and he is almost a doppelganger for Higgins. And how I got him was Higgins had passed away, and for 6 months I had gone to was actually for like 3 months. My veterinarian had recommended a support group because I really struggled with that loss. And I went to a support group, and it was infinitely helpful. It was every other week, and it was in person, and I would drive about an hour to get there. And it was very helpful, and you just would share the stories. And then Wilbur, I was, 6 months after Higgins passed away. My house was quiet. I missed the clicking of his nails. I missed his dog tags clinking when he walked.
Yeah.
And This girl, Liv, that I know, she worked at a different shelter. She worked at the shelter I used to volunteer at, and then she left there and went to another shelter. She sent me just a photo over Facebook. She goes, "Look what I found." I went, "Oh my God, who is that?" And he looked just like Higgins. And she said, "This guy, he's like a little meatball, and I just thought of you." And I was like, and she's like, "We're really trying to get him into a foster." I said, "Oh, you're looking for the idiot that's going to want a bulldog and spend, a lot of money getting him better." So I said, "All right, let me come by on Friday. I'll come meet him and see, and then if it's like we connect, then I'll bring him home to foster him." I met him. He humped my leg, and he was just so cute, and he looked so much like Higgins. And I was like, okay, I'll take him home. And I brought him home that weekend to foster him. And anybody who knew me knew he was never leaving the day he walked in that door. And he didn't. He came in, he walked in the door, he threw up on the carpet. He had to be right on the carpet too. He threw up, and I just knew he was never going to leave. So
Yeah.
I had fostered him for a month, and he was a foster fail, and I adopted him. He was a stray also. I believe that. I mean, that's a $7,000 dog with no microchip. And he was found in an affluent area. I believe the people who surrendered him were probably his owners, and they just said they found him.
Yeah.
But he has, whoever had him trained him really good. He won't go on furniture. I try. He's also 62 pounds, so it's hard to try to lift him up. He won't go on furniture. He won't go on the bed. He will not go outside when it's raining. So he has a couple quirks, and I think that's like from past trauma. But he's a sweetheart. He's just a big tank.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's awesome. He's amazing. I love him to death. And he was a good, I was ready for him. And then the other dog who has recently came into my life, and this is like like I'm very emotional about it because it's immediate, is Penelope. I wanted to, after Titus passed, I wanted to honor him, and I just wanted to help. I wanted to help a dog in need. I wanted to pick the dog that nobody else picks. I'm okay
Hmm.
with an old dog or a sick dog. And I actually am going to start, I want to be a, foster for hospice dogs, a hospice. Like, if dogs towards the end of life, that ain't easy, but I'm okay with it. Like,
Yeah.
because these dogs, they deserve as much love as you can give them. So Penelope, a friend of mine sent me a photo of her through a rescue, and I said, "Oh my God, she's so cute." And I've never had a female bulldog. She looks like she's a mix. She doesn't look like a pure English bulldog, but I met her, and her and Wilbur were okay in a neutral location, and I fostered her for a month, but she's now at her other foster mom's because she was like territorial and claiming Wilbur's beds, and his world was shrinking, and he was scared because she was launching at his face.
Yeah.
So anytime, she walked past him, he would like recoil, and he would hang out in the hallway, and he would take the long road instead of going past her. And we all said, he doesn't feel safe in his house right now, so it's probably not the right fit. But I'm still staying a part of her life. I'm contributing to her care because she has cancer. I'm going to go see her this weekend. I get pictures of her every day. So that really broke me because I really wanted that to work.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about a little bit about your experience with the grief therapy, and I'm curious because there's on my wish list there's a artist in particular that I know lost a dog and just can't imagine getting another one. They're a dog person, they love a dog dearly, but they're so brokenhearted that they can't do it again. But as someone who works in this kind of environment, you're like, just give it a chance. Or what would you say, or what's your advice?
It's my friend Mike and I talk about this all the time because he rescues basset hounds, and every time he's really, really, really strong whenever he has to let a dog go, and he always says to me, when one crosses over. They have affected your life, impacted your life, but they're also making room for another dog that doesn't have a home, that doesn't have a backup plan, that doesn't have a soft place to land. And that's how I look at it. After Higgins died, one of the things I said at the support group was, I feel guilty that I went and gave other dogs love at the shelter. And I felt really like I had betrayed him. I should have been spending time with him. And they would say to me, but you told us you worked from home and you spent hundreds of thousands of hours with him. And what you did in his honor was you wanted to go help other dogs that didn't have what he had. Why would you feel guilty? That's a beautiful thing. And I struggled with that for like the first few months. And then I was like, oh my God, I should have spent more time with him. And then I realized that there was another dog, like, and I was like, I left Higgins' beds and his bowls where they were. And I was like, I don't want any other dog to come in here and lay on his stuff. And then when I saw Wilbur, who had nothing, and these beds are just there, of course I'm going to bequeath Higgins' beds to you. And I think he would be more than okay with that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he didn't want his mom to be sad. If I
Yeah.
was ever sad or crying about something, he would come and sit next to me and just tap me with his paw because he knew, they know, I believe that they know and they intuit our emotions. And I've had a lot of friends say, oh, after I lost my last dog, I can't do it again. Look, that is, I always said I knew that was going to be the worst day of my life, and it was worse when I lost
Yeah.
Higgins. But in his honor, I feel like that's why I'm trying to help all these other dogs because of him. I quote Scott Van Pelt from ESPN every time because he gave a eulogy to his dog like 2 months after Higgins died, and he said, "It breaks me up every time." He said, "If this hurt that I feel is the cost of the transaction of the great love that I had with my dog, then I pay it gratefully." So that's how I look at it, is that the best thing I can do to honor him is help another dog in his honor. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And I believe that these dogs out there, they need it. What's going on in sheltering right now is really tough.
Yeah. Well, to end on a high note,
No, sorry,
a
was
happy.
I blabbing too much?
No, not at all. I'm bringing you there. So I'll bring the mood up. So I wind up every show with five fast, frivolous questions that I
Yeah,
call the Zoomies,
the zoomies.
trademark, copyright, patent pending. The
Yes.
first question is, do you allow your dogs to lick your face?
Yeah, of course.
I think I knew that
And
answer just by
it,
your
it,
Instagram. Question two, when we can use any of the four dogs we had just mentioned, do any of them have a theme song?
I said Penelope's red carpet song would be Jealous Again by the Black Crows. Titus, I always just says the Rocky theme song because, it was the shelter where he came from was right outside of Philly. The Higgins theme song would be A New Level by Pantera, and because of the Higgins, Hanson, Anselmo. And God, what would I give Wilbur as a theme song? I got to think about that's a good one.
Okay. Question three, this is usually for my touring artists. So hypothetically, if your dogs were out on tour, what would they want on their tour rider?
Oh my God. Okay. Peanut butter, cheese, eggs, and being pet at will. Like if they come up to you, they want to be petted, and you can't do anything else unless you give them the pets.
And that's across the board. That's all four of them could agree with that menu?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
they all love all of those things.
Question four is, do you use a dog voice?
Oh my God, yes. Like I speak to my dogs in ways that I would never want anybody in the public to hear, and they all have 9,000 nicknames. And I also sing their nicknames to them. Yes. I don't
And then
know.
last but not least, I always ask if there's a dog organization or service that you'd like to give a shout out to.
I'd like to do a couple if that's okay, just
That's
because of my
fine.
history.
Perfectly
I want to
fine.
give a shout out, obviously, to Homeward Bound Pet Adoption Center in Blackwood, New Jersey, because that is where I volunteered for, and where Titus came from. I would also give a shout out to Voorhees Animal Orphanage in Voorhees, New Jersey, because that is where Wilbur came from. And Rescue City in Brooklyn, New York is where Penelope came from. And they all do great work in the community, and they all are, it is hard work that they do. It is the Lord's work that they do.
Yeah. Well, last question I want to give is geared towards you've provided me with guests for the show. You've got a
Yeah,
great
always.
hard rocking roster of artists. And if you look at your roster, who do you immediately point to and say dog person?
Oh God. Well, of course, Matthew Peter Byrne from Hatebreed, who you've had on. I'm always sending him texts about Ziti and Ravioli, his dogs, and he'll send me videos and I'll send him pictures of Wilbur and stuff. Mike D from Killswitch, Adam D from Killswitch also was a big dog lover, but always Des from Devil Driver, even though I don't currently work with him, he loved his dogs too, and he taught me a lot about dogs. When I first got Higgins, he gave me a lot of advice. He actually met Higgins. I brought him on the bus with him one day, but I definitely always think of Matt Byrne because I know how much he loves his dogs too.
Yeah,
So.
that's great.
And another one, Jake from August Burns Red loves his friend. I think he's a French bulldog. I have noticed too that it's like I'll have a band, I have to schedule interviews for them, and like they'll be like, I'll do it later, or they keep putting it off, or they want to reschedule it, or they procrastinate on it. And I remember one time we had this, I think it was Loudwire, was doing like a dog feature, and I didn't have to wait 3 seconds. Everybody responded instantly with pictures of their dogs. Artists that don't do press, like, oh, I'll do that if it's about my dog. And it's like funny how they don't want to talk about their music, but they bring their dog. You bring up the dog, and like, oh, of course, I have to have my dog on here. But yeah, I get that because I'm just like, oh my God, my dog. Like, I am blessed and privileged to have all of them in my life.
Well, I love to hear it, and thank you for not only coming on the show, but thank you for
Thank you for having
providing me with some fantastic guests.
I'm sure we have more that you should be talking to. We'll dig some people up.
We're always open, but I appreciate your time, Amy, and it's really great to hear these stories of how dogs really do have a profound effect on people's lives.
They do. They make life better. The only flaw is what Mayor Ed Rendell from Philadelphia once said. Their only flaw is that they don't live long enough.
Yeah, amen to that.
Carl, you're a damn good dog.